What's up, friends? Welcome to Web3 Academy, a place for entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers to explore and learn how to use Web3 to transform business models and create thriving communities. Enjoy this next episode.
GM, welcome to Web3 Academy. It is the weekly doer spotlight. And today we've got with us Jeff Kauffman. Jeff is the founder of Parachute and Jump. Jump is a Discord group I've been in for months now, and it's really the best community for marketers and brands to learn about Web3. I saw recently, or maybe this was earlier this year, the morning brew called Jump, the Discord community where marketers learn about Web3. And I think, Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but probably about half of Fortune 500 companies have a brand manager in Jump. Yes. But before starting Jump, Jeff spent about 15 years focused on Web 1 and Web 2 brand building. I worked with clients, GameStop, Dr. Pepper, Chick-fil-A, and he also is an avid skydiver. And I think we'll probably start there. First off, Jeff, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Excited to chat with you guys. We're at this interesting moment in time where we're all trying to learn Web3, and so we got a lot to talk about.
Awesome. As always, I'm with Kyle's here as well. Sorry, Kyle, sometimes I forget to say hey to you at the beginning of the pod. I get so excited about the intro.
All right. Don't forget you guys. I'm here too. Hey everybody.
There he is. Okay, well, Jeff, let's start with skydiving because for those who are listening, there's a photo in the background of Jeff's video here of, I'm guessing, himself skydiving. And I asked him before we jumped on this call about that. And I think there's an interesting intersection of your passion for skydiving and online community building. And maybe that starts your story from many years ago.
It does. Skydiving, online community building, marketing, all of that kind of entered my life at the same time, which was 2005. I made my first skydive, and here in Dallas, Texas, at a local drop zone called Skydive Dallas. And after making about 9 jumps, the first jump I was obsessed. So I was like, I'm gonna do this until I don't want to do it anymore. Which I will have to say, I am a retired skydiver now. So I made 1,800 jumps, and then hung it up in 2015. So I had a really good run. But in 2005, I started jumping, was hooked, going every single week. And I looked around and I was just like, I want to meet more people that want to do this stuff. And I want to meet more people in Dallas that want to do this stuff. And what's the best way to do it? Well, maybe it's through online community building. And at the time, MySpace was the biggest social network, 2005. And so I started a MySpace page for Skydive Dallas. So I always say Skydive Dallas was my first brand client, which the funny thing is I didn't ask them to be, I just did. And then probably about 3 months into running a MySpace page for them without them knowing, the manager came up to me and was like, hey, I heard you're running a MySpace page for us. And I thought I was in trouble. I thought he was going to kick me off the drop zone and I would not be allowed back. And he was like, we should pay you because you're doing a really good job. I was like, how'd you find out? And he goes, well, we have these comment cards that like ask people after their skydive what their experience was like. And one of the sections is, how did you hear about us? And people are writing MySpace in the other box. And so that's how he found out there was a MySpace page. And then he tracked me down. And so I was like, well, I'm a poor college student. I don't have any money. Skydiving's expensive. Will you just give me free jumps? And that'll give me a reason to come out here every week. So that turned into me sort of transitioning from MySpace to Facebook. I saw the trajectory of Facebook. I saw how they were transitioning. So I transitioned the brand Skydive Dallas. All this was in college. Transitioned them to Facebook. That Facebook page became the largest page in the world for skydivers back in 2007. So in 2007, I'm running the largest page in the world for Facebook page in the world for skydivers. I'm in college. I'm now jumping as much as I want, whenever I want, because I'm driving so much business for Skydive Dallas that they're just like, you can get on the plane whenever you want. And so
just gave you the plane.
Yeah, they just basically gave me the plane. And so, yeah, I mean, I would make like 30 jumps in a day whenever I could. It was
my gosh.
Wow.
Wow.
Totally insane. And so, yeah, that kind of kicked off this 15-year kind of journey for me where I was doing online community building, social media strategy, and then I got hired into an advertising agency, big agency. If you're familiar with Chick-fil-A, our agency came up with the cows. Like that was our invention, was the Chick-fil-A cows. So big brand campaign work like that. And yeah, I entered the agency in 2009 and I knew more about social media than anybody in this sort of $1 billion agency. So I just started running social. First account I worked on was Fruit of the Loom. And then I basically spent 12 years building a social media, a digital strategy, innovation sort of practice and service within this agency.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. So takes us up till a couple years ago, I'm guessing. Yep. Take us to the next part of what got you into Web3. How did that transition happen?
So one of the things I always told myself in my career was that I wanted to be a part of whatever next massive transition happened. And I knew that I had entered my career at the start of Web 2, but I knew something else would come that would blow my mind. And I would always ask these old school advertising execs, like, what was it like to work without a computer? And like I asked every single one of them. There's so many of them in this big, huge agency. I was like, what did you do all day without a computer? And they would describe their life. And I'm like, something as big as that is going to happen. And in my lifetime, it's going to be so weird. That computer moment, like not, oh, there's mobile or now we have social media versus no. Something so transformative that it's like not working with a computer to working with a computer with internet and mobile and phone and just like so fundamentally different. So I was always like trying to find that. And my sort of gauge was just like, what's the weirdest thing? The first time I came across crypto was 2013. I actually thought it was a scam. I was like, this is complete bullshit. And so I just paid no attention to it. Then in 2017, I bought the top, like it's skyrocketed. And I was like, now, and I bought the top. But the reason I bought the top and the reason that it really sucked me in is I was standing at a gas station and the clerk and the customer who would have never been talking before, like the clerk, a dingy gas station too, just like side of the road, dingy gas station. They're both talking about Bitcoin and they're talking in a passion like they're friends. And that is what like really like caught my attention because I'd been in this world of social and community and subcultures. Like skydiving is a subculture. And then there's a niche of skydiving that I was in. There's even more of a subculture. So I'm very clued into these like subcultures and I can see like that passion and that dynamic. And when I saw that gas station clerk talking with the customer, it was that, oh my God, there's some sort of subculture thing going on here that I need to look into. And so I bought the top, wrote it all the way down, but from 2017 to 2020, I still paid attention to the space. But being a marketing guy and brand background, as I learned about the space, it's finance, it's tech. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know where I fit in any of this. I don't know that I want to go market these crypto companies that are out there. Like, so, but I'm fascinated by it because it's so weird. It's just so different. And then something else is happening during 2017 to 2020. The other thing is I'm getting extremely frustrated with Facebook, with Google, with Amazon, with Instagram, with YouTube, because from 2005 to 2017, it was kind of like this golden era of building community. And then once paid was introduced, it's like, okay, there's paid, but we can use it. It's really good. But really what happened, I won't go into like too much detail, but like these big tech companies put golden handcuffs on all of these large brands. So a lot of people will say like creators are being screwed by like Facebook and Instagram. That is true, but I view brands as enterprise versions of creators. And so these mega brands are getting shafted, and it just like Web2 just lost all its sort of luster, its charm, and just what I enjoyed from 2005 to 2017. It just wasn't there. And so 2017 to 2020, it just like really tapered off. So I start trying to find something and what's next. And somehow in early 2020, I come across the term social token. And I use like lots of fancy internet software to track conversations and whatnot. The first time the term social token was used on the internet, at least, was 2019 December. So I found it about 1 month after the term had been used. And when I hear that term, I'm just like, this is me. like I've been in social, I've been following crypto, like, and the way people described it is like, this token can organize people on the internet. And I'm like, I've been trying to organize people on the internet for 15 years. And I also have been rug pulled by Facebook and YouTube. And I understand the concept of ownership, and I don't own my digital property rights. And so when I start to think about all of that and the frustrations of Web2, and then I just hear this one little inkling of social token, I'm like, this is the future. So I spent all of 2020 essentially trying to educate and learn. One of the things I did was I created a trends deck, and because it was COVID, everybody's sitting at home. And so I just started dropping a Zoom call on like all the smartest people that I knew that work in the brand and marketing and ad tech and MarTech space. So I presented this trends deck, 2020 seems like 2 decades ago. I presented it to junior creative strategists all the way to CEO founder of a $3 billion company, right? Like a huge spectrum. And I just wanted feedback because I'm like, I'm learning all of this stuff, and I lay out DAOs and NFTs and everything we're talking about now. I lay it all out in this deck because I don't know what to do with it. I'm just like, I just see it. I just learn it. And so here, like, I just talk, like here, like, give me feedback.
Yeah.
And everybody said the exact same thing. This is so cool. I've never heard any of it before, and I have no idea what to do. Same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you hear that enough, and it's like, oh, people like it. They've never heard it, so it's new and fresh, and they don't know what to do. And then I'm sitting here like, I don't know who to talk to about this. Like, I don't know where that community is. And so that leads me to, oh, I need to start a community, right? And use these tools as a foundation for the community. And then by doing so, like, I'll scratch my own itch. I'll meet other people that have my similar professional background. We'll talk about it. And then we'll learn at a rate that we could never learn, because we're going to like fundamentally use Web3 to build our community. And so that's where Jump into Web3 came from. And the reason it's called Jump is just kind of like, I don't know, it's a little bit, it fits because we'll take a step back. When I decided that I needed to leave my agency, not my agency, but the agency I worked at, to go into Web3 full time, I was like, I need a company name. and I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what service I'm going to offer. I know I'm not doing Web 2 stuff. I'm going to do something, but I need to just stand up an LLC and like start a company. I'm just going to call it Parachute, because Parachute, like, I need a parachute to jump out of this corporate company.
I like that.
And it fit with my background. And then as the idea of like a actual product to build, in quotes, I'm quoting, as a product to build, that's where Jump came in. And it was like, oh, we need to jump into Web3. Okay, let's call it Jump. Oh, that fits really well with, you know, Parachute is the thing that's funding all this. So very organically, that's kind of where Parachute Jump came from.
It's an amazing story. First of all, I love it. I want to get into Jump, a lot of that, and I think we will get into that probably maybe more at the end. We'll explore Web3 and your thoughts on that first. And so to start with that, like, I know you said you saw the word social token, and so that was like, okay, this makes sense. What was the thing that like clicked for you, where once you learned about NFTs and DAOs and all that, like, how did you just all of a sudden know, like, okay, this is it. This is how you build communities. Like, what does Web 2 not offer to build the community in the right way? And what does Web 3 offer? Can you sort of break those down?
Yeah. So there's a few things that clicked in my brain, like just really fast, and I can't really say why, but I think it's just because I'm so close to the internet and how the infrastructure is actually built and the economy of it, right? Because I essentially worked in ad tech, because that's what social turned into, was just one big ad tech company. And so I fundamentally understand the economics of the internet as it stands now. I know this crypto thing that I'm learning about. And so when I came across social token and I understand how, oh, I can hold this token in my wallet. And then that wallet, that token is my key into any portal or website or app. And immediately I'm like, oh, well, username and password goes away. The database has changed. The database used to be Facebook server. The database is now Ethereum, the blockchain. And if the database has changed and anyone can build on top of the database, then that means that any group of people who hold a token can move between any digital experience that they want. And so, because the database is not Facebook, the database is Ethereum. And so that's kind of like the nerdy underlying thing. And so as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, well, you now in Web 2, you built communities on Facebook, like on a platform. And that community was not portable. And it was a walled garden. And that's you're in handcuffs. That's golden handcuffs I talked about. Web 3 flips that on its head. So instead of communities on platforms, communities are the platform. The reason they're the platform is because they're aligned by that token. And if they all hold that token, they can go log in to any experience, a Zoom call, the next version of Reddit, the next version of whatever, right? So communities are massively portable, and that puts the power in the community's hands versus in the platform's hands. And that just, to me, that was like, oh, well, that also makes sense from a value and economic perspective, because who creates the value for like Facebook? It's us. Like we are on the platform. People don't realize it, but it all work for Web 2. Like, think about it. You get on Facebook, you get on Google, you get on YouTube, you are an unpaid employee of those platforms, right? And so it's like, that's not the power, but you create the value, but you have your slaves. Like, this is digital slaves. That's what we're talking about. It's hard. It's like very aggressive to like think about it that way, but like, that's the world. Like, we are enslaved to these big tech companies and we get paid nothing. And sure, oh, Red, here's some like a place to rest your head, right? Like, but that's it. Like, we just get to do this stuff, and it's not fair. And so, you know, when the token is also, there's a market around the token, right? Like, it's freely tradable. that means that value can actually flow to the token, which means value flows to the community who creates the value for that network.
You also mentioned that so like obviously the users, we are the slaves of Facebook, as you said, but you also mentioned like the enterprises are in, I think you said handcuffs or shackles or something to Facebook as well. Can you just dive a little bit further into that? Because in one point of it, like enterprises do really well on Facebook in that they can build big audiences, they can run ads and spend a lot of money and, convert people off of the platform into their world. But sort of talk about what's the negative side of that you explored as well.
Yeah. So when you really get into the weeds of operating, like running a large brand on these platforms, there's some really bad things that are happening. One, your data as a brand, when you're targeting your customers and you're like running these ad campaigns, Facebook's learning, like their machine algorithms are learning what makes someone convert for a CPG product versus a financial product versus, I don't know, an auto, like whatever. And so essentially, as you just pump money into these ad campaigns to drive these conversions, you're training their algorithms to then go convert that algorithm and that targeting for your competitors. And your competitors are bidding on the same audience. And so there's a first mover advantage in terms of using this ad tech. And that first mover advantage happened between 2012 and 2017. But as the data and the machine learning and the algorithms learned, right, and started feeding that, and as more brands came in and started competing, right, it's an auction. When you buy these ads, if you're not familiar with it, it's an auction. All these brands are competing against each other. And basically, it only benefits Facebook because the price just goes up. Right. And then Facebook does more and more and more to trap, like, you made the comment, which is a good observation, and Facebook fights it. But the comment about, hey, we can sort of reach our audience and then convert them over here to our ecosystem. Well, Facebook does everything it can to stop that from happening and continually build new products. And so like the commerce functionality, it's like, oh no, don't buy on the brand's website. We're going to allow you to upload your entire product catalog into Facebook, and you're going to run ads, and then the conversion, and before you know it, like you're never going to the brand's website. And now Facebook has basically a chokehold on all distribution, all conversions, and all that. And we saw that with Google. So what did Google do with websites? For a long time, it sent traffic to these other websites. But over time, Google started building in the back end to say, no. Don't actually put your content into Facebook. You'll get, or into Google, you'll get more exposure. And so over time, Google's just said, and it's just like pulled it all more and more into its own. That's where the term, if you Google walled garden, that's where the term came from, because these big tech companies, and mainly Google and Facebook, are most guilty of this. Amazon to a certain degree as well, is they create these walled gardens where once it's attractive, so you come in, but then you can't get out.
Very interesting. And so you said you went to all these brands, you explained to them, like, I'm assuming you explained to them this, and you're like, this isn't the future. And so you explained Web3, and you said a lot of them didn't know what to do with it. This was back then, I think in 2020, you mentioned.
Yeah.
What about now? What are conversations like? Like, how are those conversations changed over the last couple of years as you speak with bigger brands and these companies?
Oh, it's night and day. It's everything that I thought was going to take 4 to 5 years to happened in 6 months. So like in 2020, I was like right in terms of what I thought would happen. And then I was completely wrong on the timeline.
And it works.
And it
That's
all happened 6 to 12 months earlier. And thank God I was pretty nervous about leaving my corporate gig. It is a good gig. But I always wanted to pursue like the next big wave and be out in front of it. And so when I talk to brands now, it's like that first thing I said about people were like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like all the words you just said, I've never heard them before. That's not the conversation anymore, right? Like, it's like, I've heard of NFTs, I've heard of social tokens, I've heard of crypto, I've heard of wallets, I've heard of MetaMask. I don't know what it is, but I've heard of it, right? And so that awareness phase is like completely, like we've made it past that. So at this point where we're kind of like at mass awareness, but not mass adoption, and not even mass like intent, right? Like people are still like, they're not even sure if they want to do it yet, but they've heard of it.
Right.
Heard of it. It's like bubbling around. And to a certain degree, you know, people are like, you know what, whatever I do, and this is just the nature of business, life, corporate America, whatever I do in Web3 is not going to help me reach my quarterly goals. So like, I'm actually putting it off because it's not going to help me in the next quarter, but I'm aware of it and I know I have to figure it out at some point. And so a lot of people are kind of in that bucket. And then you've got this like leading edge group of brands and innovators. And it's usually a single person inside of a big agency or a big brand. Mostly it's inside of a big brand, because agencies are just, they can only do what their clients want to do. Right. So usually there's some brilliant renegade, like, I don't care if I get fired type of person who like doesn't give a shit about the quarterly goals. And it's just like, I want to do cool stuff. I want to be innovative. And so there's people like that, not very many. Visa has a guy Sheffield, Time Inc., you know, Keith. They've also been empowered, but I think they've also led the way too, right? Like they've convinced their colleagues and whatnot. And so, yeah, there's now these renegades that are like trying stuff. And, you know, a lot of times a question that I'll get is like, what are brands doing wrong in Web3 right now? And my response back is nothing. Nothing. Because you know what? The brands that are doing stuff they're experimenting, they're learning. Of course, they're going to make mistakes. The people that are doing it wrong is everybody who's sitting on the sideline and not experimenting. That's the mistake. Way too many people focus on like, oh, that was a mistake. You launched that wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Blah, 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 all that. None of those are mistakes. Those are pioneers, and those are people learning.
Yeah, I mean,
we're
go ahead.
Go for it, Jay.
We get excited sometimes. The press alone of doing a Web3 campaign makes it worth it in my mind right now.
Totally.
You know, you're gonna get such a viral lift from the media just flow of any Web3 story that they're looking to grab right now. So even if it didn't work from a profit standpoint, which I'm sure often it's probably difficult to make that work right now, there's so much benefit to come, right?
Totally. I mean, when Visa bought their CryptoPunk, we're not even coming a year, right? That was last year.
Yeah, good point.
When they bought their CryptoPunk, the media coverage that they got from buying that was probably 20x what they actually paid for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Jeff, I have a question for you. What do you think? So there's a lot of brands that are wondering what the heck's going on here with Web3. What do you think is the challenges or the main challenges of Web3 right now that's kind of holding back a lot of these people from coming in? You said there's a lot of them on the sidelines, not knowing what to do. What are the main challenges you think at this point?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two buckets to put in terms of the challenges. It's the individual that's sitting within a brand, of them just learning and not just their own like, oh, I've got to learn how to use this computer, because that's what Web3 is. It's a new kind of virtual computer, like computing platform, right? We talked about how Ethereum is the database for social. Like that's a computer, it's a database. And so that's the first challenge, is just like the individuals within inside of these companies actually being able to learn and understand what's going on. Then there's the business challenges, like making the business case. And so there's a few ways to go about framing that, whether you're an entrepreneur talking to investors or whether you're a Fortune 1000 kind of company. There's different kind of angles that you'll take. But it's getting over the business case, because a CFO who, CFOs, they like to count their beans and they don't like to give their beans up. And that's good. Like we need good bean counters. But you have to make the case of like, I'm going to take your beans and I'm going to give you more beans back. And, that's a hard case to make right now.
Do CFOs know you call them bean counters?
I used to call my own CFO bean counters.
There's no bean counters on this podcast, and nobody listening to this podcast is a bean counter, so we're safe. We're safe. What about, Jeff, the other challenge that I keep hearing brands bring up is just the size of the Web3 market right now, right? The amount of users that there are, something like 500,000 wallets own NFTs, 50 million wallets globally, roughly in the world. What do you do if is that big enough in your mind to go after something in Web3? Or do you think that's what's causing some of the brands to sit on the sidelines?
It's definitely what's causing a lot of brands to sit on the sidelines. The dangerous thing about sitting on the sidelines is when we talk about the growth. So let's like kind of start with the data point that you just gave, which is a great data point. There's roughly 300,000 active traders or buyers of NFTs on a monthly basis, right? There's $3 billion of trading volume happening. It's only 300,000 wallets. Oh, here's another data point. If you're trying to launch an NFT campaign, a lot of NFT campaigns don't mint out, and they don't know why. It's because of those 300,000 monthly active wallets just for NFTs, right? The number you gave like takes into a bit like Dogecoin or all wallets, it's a bit bigger, but like specifically NFTs are the things that make the most sense for brands. So that's a good data point to focus on. Of those 300,000, 30 to 40,000 of those wallets drive like the vast majority of the activity. So we're kind of at this rough kind of patch of, if I'm launching an NFT campaign, is my audience really in that 30 to 40,000? Chances are no, right? Chances are those are just degen flippers that want to take your NFT and sell it at a higher price to the person that you actually want in your community. Right. And so that's a bad scalper. That's it's a scalper. So that's not good. But like, let's rewind to maybe like 15 months ago, like not even a year and a half ago. There were only 500,000 MetaMask wallets.
Wow.
Yeah, that's insane.
There were even in 2020, when I gave that trends deck, there were even fewer.
Yeah.
Right. But like when I was given that trends deck in 2020, the wallet growth had gone from like 30,000 to 500,000 in like 6 months. And it was like, look at this growth. Well, then if you go from that 500,000 point to where we are today, we've gone from 500,000 wallets to, I think MetaMask's last report was 30 million.
Yeah.
Right now, that doesn't mean they're monthly active, right? But that's the business case, right, of exponential growth. And there's this like growth curve that's very important for people to understand is we're all familiar with exponential growth of just like the hockey stick, right? Starts low and then hockey sticks up. But really the way growth works is there's S curves. And so, if you're listening to this on audio, just like it's a little bit different. Maybe we can post it in the show notes or something like that. But basically, we go through these moments where there's exponential growth and then it flatlines for like 5 years. So Web 2, we had massive exponential growth between 2005 and 2015. And then in the digital landscape, if you were in the space, 2015 to 2020 was not exciting, right? That's the flat line. We're now right at the start, that hockey stick again. And so if you miss those hockey sticks, you just miss tremendous upside in what you can do with your brands.
I think the other data point too is like, I think the last report I saw, it was from Raul Pal and his partner at GMI. It was like something like 360 million users like hold crypto or own crypto in some way, which like those are the people that are on the sideline to like they have the assets to just bridge right into Web3. Now, they haven't done it, many of them, but something will get their attention and get them to do it. Maybe it's just user experience needs to get better, whatever it is, but they're close, they're there. And I think that's another great data point to show is like, they're on the sidelines, right? They're about to come. They just need to download a wallet.
So yeah, let's like use very fundamental marketing frameworks. We've got kind of mass awareness. And like, if you walk to anybody and you said, have you heard of Bitcoin or crypto? The answer would be yes. Or if you've heard of blockchain, probably yes. So that's awareness. And then the data point you just gave is purchase intent, right? It's like you have a wallet, you hold something, and you're showing a high signal of purchase intent, right? And they're right at that point, right? In the next couple of years, they're going to flip down to highly active sort of members of this space. And so if you're a brand, you're saying, wow, there's 300 million people showing high signal purchase intent, and nobody's got a good offering for them, but somebody's going to have that.
Right. And the opportunity size is 7 billion people, right? It's the whole world can use this. It's not just one country or one demographic. It's anyone and everyone. And they already are. Like, this is such a global thing that's happening here. So, I mean, the business case is unbelievable. So you speak to a lot of brands. Do you have like a framework where you're like, okay, I don't know, you're talking to someone from Cola or Pepsi or whatever, and they have the guy that wants to go rogue and doesn't care about beans. He's like, okay, I want to bring this, this enterprise into Web3. Do you have sort of a framework of like, here's where to start, here's what you should do? Maybe it's like launch an NFT, or it's a POAP, or it's a token, or like, what are you thinking? And can you walk us through a bit of a playbook?
So actually the first thing that you've got to do, it's not the fun part, but you've got to go talk to the legal counsel. Right? Like, we can talk about cool activations all day long, but if you're an actual business and you're not starting from scratch, and you're not an entrepreneur that's like, flying a little bit under the radar, if you're a real business, especially if you're a public company, right? We're talking about public companies in that case, but even private companies that have been around, gotta go talk to the legal team. All right, sort out all the legal stuff, like just get kind of through some of that. Then you got to go talk to the bean counters. There's always got to go back to the bean counters. Then you have to go get the finance team on board. And then once you get the finance team on board, so essentially, like, a lot of people make the mistake of not getting buy-in from their peers before they have this brilliant idea. So I think the people that are really forward thinking and innovative and go rogue inside of these companies, they're actually really good at getting internal buy-in and getting champions that will support them in each of the departments that matter, right? And so if you're an entrepreneur, your version of that is all of like your customers and like the different segments of your customers, and maybe even your partners that like maybe some of your suppliers are maybe part of this ecosystem. And so there's this moment of like, you need to go get alignment with a lot of people. You can't just come up with this idea and do it on your own. The reason is because, when we think about marketers, this is not a marketing campaign. There is a marketing campaign to support it, but this is a new business. This can literally be a new subsidiary of most companies. It can be its own P&L, but even that's a little bit short-sighted, because it's almost like saying, like, at the start of like just using software and computers and the internet and cloud services, this affects every part of the organization, every part of the organization, and it fundamentally changes business models. And so first step is you got to go kind of get buy-in. Okay, so once you get buy-in and once you start to have some of those conversations, one of the best ways to get buy-in is to run workshops, do training. And so as you're listening to conversations like this, right, just go take all the podcasts, all the articles where we talk about all this stuff. Inside of Jump, there's people that share decks and there's lots of resources. Just go train people. Okay, so as you train people, as you onboard people, there's lots of cool tools like POAPs. So POAPs are a form, POAP is a form of an NFT that doesn't cost any money. And so you can actually, what you want to do is you want to be the first person to like onboard your CFO, your legal counsel, your creative team, get them to set up with a wallet at the end of your presentation, have them collect a POAP, and then go into and like connect their wallet to a token gated. Like, you need to like do these experiences and like have people kind of touch and feel it. And then once you've got people leaning in like that and they're having fun and they're asking questions, people are going to get excited, and then you can take it kind of further, and then you can work with all of these now partners that you have to lead the organization into Web3.
Super smart. Like, once you get someone to download the wallet and connect to an application, it's the aha moment. I feel like for everyone, they're just like, whoa, I didn't need to create an account. All my stuff moves with me. Like, I like that. Actually, get the company involved first.
You do that, and then you show them the growth trends, right? And then it's like, okay, which side of this equation are we going to be on?
So, okay, so that's corporate Jeff's hat. I got to ask, let's put on DGen Jeff hat. If you were to speak to more of an entrepreneur or more of somebody who's not at a big corporation, doesn't actually need to get buy-in, what would you say to them in terms of advice or frameworks to think about getting into Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. So I fit in this conversation. Like, now I'm kind of talking to myself. So as I'm talking to the entrepreneurs out there, I'm also talking to myself because now I'm in that bucket. So one of my strategic move that I think can be applied to any industry and dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of ways, is when I started to have those conversations. Remember, like, nobody knew what it was. They didn't know where to start. And then we've talked about how adoption is low. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I want to get out in front of this? Well, it's too early for me to go start a brand around, something and go, take on Levi's. I actually used to own a denim store as a hobby. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but it was the best denim store in Texas. So like, when I saw this stuff, I'm like, well, why don't I go take on Levi's? And I'm like, just people aren't ready for it, right? Like, I can take on Levi's in a couple of years. So really what many entrepreneurs can and should do is go work with their industry peers, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it actually can even mean your competitors, right? Yeah. There's so much blue ocean and white space to go conquer that it actually doesn't matter if you and your competitors like collaborate. You actually might find your next business partner, right? That way. And so I would say, if you're sitting there and you're an entrepreneur and you're like, or a small business, and you don't think it makes sense for your customer yet, but nobody's activating your industry segment, you should go activate your industry segment. Okay, well, if you don't know what to do, how do you do it? Okay, go join a Web3 community, right? And so we've got tons of individuals who are inside of Jump and use Jump as a learning experience. And then they go activate a ton of like what they learn inside of the jump community to their own, in their own way, in their own interpretation of it with a totally different group of people, which is fantastic. And then that will give you like, it's sort of like, I think a B2B element right now is actually a really good approach, and like trying to work with your peers and entrepreneurs and forward thinking people. And then you'll start to develop really strong playbooks. Now, should people go ahead and start like trying to bring this to their actual customer bases? Yes, but I would start with this. I would start with building a really strong community. Take all the Web3 stuff out of it, right? Take all the wallets out of it, take all the NFTs out of it, and go build and invest in community. Now, if you've been around for like the last 15 years, you probably heard people say community, 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 and it never really panned out. And a lot of that was because what did Facebook do? They killed organic reach. They changed the models, right? They rug pulled us, walled gardens. And so we know why community essentially got chokehold, choked out, like the air got just choked out of that strategy. But it's back. And like it's, you know, as someone who saw the last 15 years and then looking at this technology, my professional like opinion is that it's community is real this go around, and the best thing to get ready for it is to build a strong community. Because if you actually have that community, layering on NFTs or tokens or Web3 is just gasoline.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're starting with the NFT, well, that's the classic mistake of, oh, I'm starting with the shiny object. I'm not starting with the substance. Like, you know, you gotta grill the steak before you eat
it. Sounds like a true Texan.
Yeah. We could probably do an entire podcast just on community with you, but we won't. And maybe we will another time, actually, Jeff. But I'd love to just Cole's Notes, maybe, which I found out, by the way, Cole's Notes, I think is just a Canadian term. You guys call it Cliff Notes, I think, in the US. But yeah, I learned this the other day. Yeah, interesting fact. I'd love to just hear, like, what are your tips on how do you create a community? Because most people are used to creating audiences, right? Like on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, whatever. These are audiences. It's not a community. Like you said, these don't really exist in the Web2 world all that well. What's your sort of like how do you create a really good engaged community? Any tips there?
I think the first thing, it's a mindset shift. And the first thing to creating a good community is to not care about the size of the community. Mm-hmm. Right? That's lesson number one. I don't care how big the community is. It's all about feels and vibes. Mm-hmm. And you have to achieve feels and vibes, which is a better term for good culture. Because good culture is too corporate. So yeah, it's just like throw the size of the community out the door and create a real group that, like, you as a brand and as an entrepreneur, whether you're the CMO, right, of a Fortune 1000 company, or you're an entrepreneur, your time spent building this community and participating in the community should be fun. It should feel fun, and you shouldn't care. And if you'll figure out like the tactics of kind of what to do. But if it doesn't feel fun, one of two things is happening. You might be working at the wrong company, right? You actually just need to change jobs because you don't like your customers. And if you're an entrepreneur, and a CMO, and like you don't enjoy the community aspect of it, like you're either going about community wrong, or you don't like the product and you don't like the people around it. And you know what? That's okay. Like, go get a new job and go, you know, build a community at a place that you like. So that's kind of the framework. And I think if you start there, what you'll do is you'll listen to the community, you'll understand what they need, and then you'll start to connect the dots between where your business can actually serve them in a way that's beneficial to them and beneficial to your business. But you're not going to do that unless you get in these like smaller settings and these intimate settings. And when there's 10,000 people in a Discord, right? Like if that happens too fast, then you're not going to discover that, right? Like when you build a community, it's just fundamental. You have to start small. You have to start with 5 people and then grow it to 10 and then grow it to 20, but not double it to 40, grow it to 25, right? It's just like a slow build. So I'll use Jump, for example. The very first Jump meeting was a 30-person Zoom call. I capped it at 30. I felt like I could get on a call with 30 people. These were people that just signed up, right? I just put it out into the world. I'm starting this community. There's a website it said Jump and it said request invite. And it explained nothing, right? If you knew me, you knew what it was about. That was it. And once 30 people signed up, we had a Zoom phone call. I had 3 of those. So I talked to 90 people. Then we invited those 90 people into Discord. And then for like 6 months, we just chatted every Thursday and we just talked. And we did like this member roundtable series. And I would just find someone in the community and I'd be like, tell your story to everybody else. And, rotating casts of like 20 people would show up every Thursday. And then curate some news, kind of send it out. And over time, the other thing I did was every single person for the first 10 months that joined the community, when I sent a welcome email, I included a link to my calendar. So I literally said, you join this community, you've been invited to Discord, but you also can schedule a meeting with me if you want. And so over the course of a year, I had 700 one-on-one Zoom phone calls. So when I say like community is hard work and you have to enjoy it, you need to enjoy like the people that you're getting to know. And if you do that, then you'll develop this wonderful base of people that will support you, give you ideas, give you feedback, maybe work with you, buy your products, just all kinds of great things will come out of that.
Yeah, what I love about that, it reminds me of, we did a podcast last week with some of the founders of Safari DAO, and the line that really stuck out, which I don't remember where this quote came from, which was, when you're starting community, do things that don't scale first. And the one-on-one Zoom call fits into that perfectly, right?
Yep.
It's not scalable. Do you still do the one-on-one Zoom call?
No, I can't, because there's like 200 people a week joining Jump. So like literally my calendar can't take it. So I just can't do it.
Right. But you never would have got there had you not done that first in order to build the strength of the community.
Correct.
So when you think about like building and cultivating that strong community, one thing that I saw recently was this article that A16Z put out about go-to community versus go-to-market, right? And this idea of, community building versus go-to-market. How do you think about that in terms of when so many people right now are so focused on, beans and revenue, right? Like, how do we get more people to focus on building community?
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things, because I totally agree with that sort of line of thinking, is go to market or go to community versus go to market. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're building out your runway, your capital, your financing, and all of that, you've got to think about this phase where you're not going to have revenue and you're investing in your community. And if you're building a physical product or whatever, you've got to budget for that too. But essentially, like, your marketing budget is being funneled into a community strategy, right? And you've got your runway for that. And ideally, if you do that really well as you build your product and create your product and make stuff, And then you're taking those marketing dollars and you're investing them in community versus like sponsorships, partnerships, and all of that stuff. Not to say that you won't do that in the future, but that's not your go-to market strategy, right? Your go-to community strategy is to take those marketing dollars and invest in community. So if you're a brand or an entrepreneur, it has to be someone's full-time job. Like, just, that's it. Like, you've got to find the budget to make it someone's full-time job. And if you're the entrepreneur and you like to do that, then, it can pretty much be your full-time job. Community building for me has been my full-time job for the last year. But if you're not, then you have to hire someone. And this needs to be almost like co-founder type. It doesn't have to be co-founder type person if you're an entrepreneur, but it needs to be damn near pretty close. And if you look at the Web3 projects that are super successful, they treat their community builders as that like upper echelon, versus like if you're in Coca-Cola, various large brands, like we all know, like the people that are in their 40s right now were the interns running community, 15 years ago, and they did not, like, they got paid terrible, blah, 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 all this stuff. So yeah, it's like you've got to invest. You've got to invest, and it's either your time or it's dollars into a person that's actually gonna care about it. And then you just have to be okay that, like, the idea that community is not going to scale into the tens of thousands or millions. In fact, like, you don't want it to. Actually, you want to try to keep it small, and that's okay. Because then there's this interesting thing that happens is because the internet has this natural network effects around it, you have the ability to take a really small group of people and influence billions. And taking it back to what we talked about earlier, there are 300,000 monthly active people, right, in trading NFTs. They have 300,000 people have created awareness of NFTs for what, 50 million people at least, maybe 100 million, maybe 300 million, right? Like 1,000x their own activity. So I firmly believe that the right, like, 1,000 people can influence 100,000 people. 100% believe that. Yeah, I think that's a good take on go to community versus go to market. You will go to market, like, that will come, but you'll go to market with your community.
Kai, you're muted.
Yeah, it was just, as you were talking there, one of the things I was thinking about is, like, typically in the Web2 world, you build the product first, right? You're building the tech, you're building the application, whatever, you're putting together all the code, and then you're looking for investment and trying to go to market. And in Web3, it's different. You're not even worried about the tech yet. You're like, let's just build the community. Let's get the people in the right place. And then it's like, from there, something happens. You either, you build a product from that, or you get your investment because you launch a token or whatever. So it's just kind of, I was just seeing the differences there between Web2, Web3. It's kind of interesting.
So I told you we weren't going to talk about denim, but we're going to talk about denim. So when I launched the denim store, again, this was just a complete hobby. So I was working at an agency full time, but we like to party on the weekends. So what we did was we set up a denim shop that only existed on Saturdays at next to a coffee shop. And we filled a fridge with beer. And me and my buddy, who's co-founder, but we're really just friends that want to, like, hang out, we sat there every Saturday and we just drank beer. And we had a good Facebook page, Instagram, we're digital marketers. So we grew this great Instagram, and we just invited people to come hang out and drink beer with us. And enough people came and hung out and drank beer and then bought jeans that we organically, from just hanging out on Saturdays as a community, we organically, like, had the demand to go invest in a 5-year lease and fill an entire store with inventory. And we did it by hanging out and drinking beer.
Unbelievable.
I love it.
So like if you're an entrepreneur, you want to validate an idea, you want to get your early customers, you want to find your early employees, you want to find your business partners, you want to find even your investors, you just start hanging out. And the great thing about online right now is you can hang out online. So I think the other thing to sort of make note of is, we're talking a lot about being like an entrepreneur and getting started and all of these tactics. I think it's also extremely important, if you're going to be in a community and lead a good community, you need to participate in a community and be led by someone else. The reason for that is, one, you see what it's like on your side, on the other side of the equation. So you have better empathy for your community members. But then two, if you choose the right community and the right leader, you're going to learn a ton. And so what I encourage a lot of people to do in Web3 for their strategy, because it's so hard to keep up with so many discords or communities, right? Like if you're getting into the space, the first thing everybody does is they get a part of like 10, 20, 30 communities, and then they realize they can't keep up with anything. And really, like between their full-time job and their family, like maybe you can keep up with 2 communities, maybe, right? So what I encourage people to do is find one professional community and then one passion kind of community. Now, there are some passions out, like things that people are passionate about. There might not be a Web3 community for that. Okay, so you're going to have to change your passion. I don't know. I think most people listening to this are probably interested in art, or maybe music. There are so many Web3 tokenized communities that are centered around art and music. And so, for me, there's a couple communities, Quantum and Proof. So I'm a member of both of those, and those are art-based communities. And so I can be a part of another community, be led by incredible like entrepreneurs and leaders, and I can learn from them and I can have fun while I'm doing it. And then I've got my professional community and then my entrepreneurial sort of work in Jump.
Right. So we talked a lot about community, and this is community without tokens, basically, is what we've talked about. But everybody in Web3, they care about tokens. They want to know, how do I launch a token? How do I launch an NFT? This is the question I get in my DMs more than anything, I think. So maybe the best way to answer this is talking about your journey with Jump. But I'm interested, like you built this community, no token to start, and you were doing all the non-scalable things you can do to build this community, it sounds like. How did you introduce a token? Like, and what was the reason that token came in? Because I think Jump still doesn't necessarily have a product. Like, it's not creating revenue as far as I know yet. I'm sure that's coming down the road and we can discuss that. But like, what was the purpose in introducing a token, and maybe just share kind of how you went about that?
Yep. So a couple things. We have an ERC20 token, which is a fungible token. It's not an NFT. It's not liquid. So that is the only token that we've introduced into the community. So it doesn't represent like ownership. Really, we use that token as like a high five. And like this, we're using some like Web3 tooling. It feels Web3. And basically anybody in the community can like tip each other and just like send each other like 5 Jump tokens. It's just fun like to do. That's it. Then there's the NFT kind of component, and we've actually held off on launching an NFT. By the time we launch the NFT, we will have crossed when that first Zoom call. So we will have been at this a year. Now, do I think you could do it faster? I don't want to put like timelines on people. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that timeline has just come down to me learning and my own kind of way, and understanding like what kind of made sense. There's a lot of behaviors in the Web3 ecosystem and people copying like these drop models and trying to sell out of a token in like 10 minutes and things like that. And, we don't have to kind of go down that rabbit hole, but a lot of the models that I've seen of how to bring a token to market, not tech wise, but just like launch it, it was everything but community, because it's just the degen flippers that are buying it. And so, when we introduce the NFT to the Jump community, we are actually introducing it to a community versus trying to attract a community. And then from like a go-to-market strategy, here's one of the things that I think a lot of people get wrong, and entrepreneurs kind of just like, your brain just doesn't quite work this way. Typically in a business model, you want to create as much margin as possible. So you want to sell a product for high, produce it for as low as you can, and then have this amazing margin. Well, one, on a token, there's already 100% margin, right? Because there's really no cost of goods sold, right? We're getting bean counter talk, but we got to do it. So really, you actually want to price a token as low as you possibly can, right? That's actually the right approach. Way too many people price this stuff way too high. One of the reasons why you want to price it low is because it's massively speculative in terms of like, is this even going to work? Like, let's be honest, there's a 90% chance if you're trying to start something, you're going to fail. Probably 99% chance. So don't take a lot of people's money, especially if you like them, and you want to get to know them better. And just believe me, like, you don't need this inflict. I know it like sounds good to like drop 10,000 tokens and overnight you've raised $2 million, but like, you don't need to do that. So one, like that go to market of like, you want to actually get the token into your community's hands. So that's why you need to build community first. And then when you do it, you want to price it massively low. And one of the benefits or unlocks that Web3 has is that you can put a royalty in that token. So as you, the business or the entrepreneur or the creator, creates value for the people holding that token, then demand on that token will increase and more people will want it. And you as the creator, whether you're, identify as a business creator, like, or an artist or something like that, you'll receive a royalty off of that. And so really the best strategy is to either give away the tokens for free and or price it really, really low.
Now, other than the royalty aspect of it, they're like, why token, right? Like, I have a community and it's like you said, it's like everyone wants to make 10,000 NFTs or tokens or whatever and put them out there. But like, what do you see as sort of the reason that a business should be launching these things? Like, other than like, yeah, it's cool, you get some branding. It, when Visa buys a CryptoPunk, they didn't launch a token, but you get some PR as you do this stuff. Like, what do you see as the real sort of utility or like reason that someone would do this, or a business would do this?
Yep. So there's two buckets there. You've got, and one, it's a really great question. And the two buckets are, we kind of touched on it earlier, how communities are a social network, and that social network can travel through the internet or in real life, so URL or IRL. So that token is a coordination mechanism that makes that community portable. Because of that, you can layer in all this additional value around people who hold that token. And ideally, the value that you're creating, so like, oh, I get to go into this VIP lounge, or I get a discount at this retailer and this retailer, or from this brand and this brand, because you're going around and you're creating all these partnerships and experiences. And then it's like, okay, well, you're a business and an entrepreneur. You're like, I'm not making any money. I'm just like creating this, like, I'm just creating all this cool stuff for like these 10,000 people. Well, that's okay, because these 10,000 people or 1,000 people, like seriously, it can be 500 to 1,000 people. These are your super fans, and you're giving them ownership of the social network that surrounds your brand. So one thing that Web3 does that like any new technology unlocks value where we couldn't access the value before. So for a long time, oil was not valuable. Like, we had to have technology to unlock the value that oil had. So for a long time, we've never been able to unlock the value of the social network around our brand or business. That's what the NFTs do. The NFTs actually unlock, but the only way to unlock it is to give it to your to that social network that surrounds your brand. And then by giving that ownership to that social network that surrounds your brand, that's where you get that amplify effect where 1,000 people can influence 100,000 people, or 10,000 people can influence 1,000,000 people. And so the benefit to the brand is that these, this small group of token holders are your super fans. And then you, as the entrepreneur of the brand, you need to think bigger and beyond just these 1 to 10,000 people and say, so if my community is 500 people, my customer base is like 5,000, right? I think a rough like 10x is a good like estimate. And then you can be like, of my customer base, I'm going to allow 10% to basically, and you're saying 10% because you just like 500 tokens, to freely acquire this token. Like we talked about in the beginning, you give it away or sell it at a really low price. But once it's out in the market, it's tradable, right? And so you're basically allowing anyone in your sphere of your customer base, however you define the size of your market, to say, if you love my product and this community and the people that buy this product or care about this like service or whatever, if you love it so much, you can enter this super fandom. And you can actually own your position in that super fandom by buying that token from someone else. And then your job as the brand or the creator is to deliver value to those people. But they're going to give you feedback. They're going to be closest. You're going to release your products to them. You're going to give them. You're going to learn from them, and they're going to benefit along the way.
So we talk a lot about the community part of Jump. I'm curious to hear a bit about the team part of Jump. And I don't know exactly the way you think about the team. And is it just Jeff as the founder? You talked about at the beginning, these 90 people on these first Zoom calls. There's a lot of talk and a lot of hype around decentralization, right? But creating a business and building something in the beginning often requires centralization, right? And so I'm curious about the way you've thought about building your team and maybe what lessons you've learned that you would advise to somebody else that's looking to build something in Web3.
Well, one of the first things like to think about or go back in history is like, what's the OG in this space of decentralization? It's Bitcoin. But like, did Bitcoin just magically appear decentralized, or did it start in some person's head, that person called Satoshi Nakamoto as the creator? And who knows, that might have been a group of people, we don't know, right? And then Satoshi Nakamoto, assuming it's a male, sent that to Hal Finney. There was no decentralization. He sent the email to Hal Finney to say, hey, mine the first block of Bitcoin. There was nothing decentralized about that, right? And so decentralization can come over time. And then there's also multiple layers of decentralization. I would not get worried or wrapped up in decentralization, because decentralization ultimately is a tactic to help you in certain scenarios. And the best example or the best framework for the need, like when is decentralization a need, is when you are in threat, like when like the government can take your assets. Okay, well, how do we decentralize, or the government can shut this thing down? Okay, well, let's decentralize it to the point where it's impossible to shut down, right? But if we're not worried about stuff like that, then decentralization becomes this lever that starts to get in our way. And then if we're talking about typically marketers and entrepreneurs and creatives, I like to think of like an entrepreneur more like a musician. It's its own form of artistic kind of creation. You don't like go to some like brilliant musician and like let his let the fans create the next outlet. You don't do that. Like the fans actually want the musician to create the thing and then deliver value. And so I think that a really good model that's going to fit for a lot of people is this pairing of centralization and decentralization, where you have a decentralized community and a decentralized autonomous community, and they can even be an organization to a certain degree. Like you can feed them budget or to just do whatever they want with, but it's decentralized and it's autonomous, meaning anybody can enter by buying or selling the NFT whenever they want. So that's autonomous. It's decentralized, meaning I don't own someone else's position. The creator doesn't own my place in this community. Only I own like what I own. So ownership in that sense is decentralized. And so if you can achieve that, you've achieved something great. You've decentralized ownership into a social network that surrounds your brand, and it's autonomous, meaning anybody can enter it at any point. And so your job as an entrepreneur, as a creator, is to be empathetic, to listen, but at the end of the day, like you have a creative and artistic vision, and you should like keep pushing on that, and you should allow the people that are attracted to that to find their way in, and this is the autonomous part, and allow the people that aren't attracted to that to find their way out.
So I want to zoom out just a second here, and maybe this is as we begin to wrap up this conversation, but I kind of want to zoom out. You talked about how Web3 really like unlocks the community, like value to the community, which I think is super cool. NFTs, tokens, they sort of enable that. But like overall, let's say in the future, like where do you think that this goes? Like what else does this unlock? Like right now, a lot of the things we see, like let's say Bored Ape Yacht Club is one of the best examples of unlocking value to a community, obviously. But the things that they're going is like, we're going to build a video game. We're going to film a movie with Coinbase. Like these are still somewhat skeuomorphic. They're not really this like completely evolutionary, like revolutionary, like changing everything about business kind of thing that you might expect something as big as Web3 will do. I don't know if you've thought this far into it, but is there something like that you've thought to like 5-10 years where just everything changes? Like, what does that look like to you? Or do you have any thought on that?
Yeah. So, okay. So at first, when you started answering the question or asking the question, I was like, oh gosh, I'm not going to have a good answer to this, but you gave me enough time to think about it. So we're talking a lot about community and organizing people and aligning incentives. And so if those are like some of these guiding principles, and we think about how ownership and incentives and community change, I think that and I'm not, this is not necessarily completely from my brain, but Balaji, if you do follow Balaji at all.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So he would be the person to like go deep on this subject with and try to find all of his sort of thinking. And he's one of those people that can be like, okay, I can take this 10 to 15 years out into the future. But there's this idea of what he calls a network state. I think it's like network city makes more sense to me, or just like some sort of like city graph where like we're used to thinking of, oh, I live in Dallas, or I live in whatever, like Denver, whatever city, and I'm confined by this kind of geographical space, and my ownership is actually kind of in this tiny little space. I think that like we're gonna essentially have these network cities where you'll own your place in the community. You won't necessarily own the actual property that you live in, but that community will own property that's physically distributed, and it's kind of like this city, and you can bounce from location to location. And now that we're working remote, it makes it even easier. And so you can show up to any geographical location and instantly have like a place to stay that you actually own. You're not paying necessarily rent, or you might be paying similar to the way you pay down your mortgage. You might be paying in that sense, but the same way that you can own your house outright and just pay taxes, I think that you'll be able to do that and basically be able to, depending on what network city that you essentially live in, be able to travel all over the world. So where that sort of goes even future, I think that the largest companies and projects in the world will own massive real estate. And by working for Yuga Labs as an employee, you will essentially have ownership because you own ApeCoin. At a certain level of ApeCoin, you'll be able to have property rights in the physical world, and all your food will be free as well. And like we start to get towards this, like I own my place in the community, and that community actually owns physical real world stuff that I have access to. And yeah, I mean, I think we saw early versions of like Google and Facebook trying to create this, where they create these like big, large tech campuses. All the employees come in, they basically stay there 24/7. There's many like apartments and, lodging, and they get all their food for free. And there's something about what they were trying that like made sense, but wasn't quite possible. I think tokens, because they unlock a new type of capital and value, actually create enough abundance in the world that your ownership inside of these communities means access to all your physical real world needs.
You ended up with a great answer. And actually, I was talking with David Mihal, who we had on this podcast a few weeks ago, about this as well. And he was like, it's kind of similar to like if you're a Google employee, you have a card and you can like go to any one of the Google offices, which they're in like all the big cities all around the world. And he's like, you go in, you scan your card, it opens up, you've got food for the day. You have a community of people who are like somewhat in similar interests because you work at the same place. You already probably know these people because you're in Slack with them, whatever. And he was like, that's kind of where this could all go, is that, but obviously in a more ownership, as you said, in a way where you actually own this stuff. Because as an employee for Google, you don't own anything. In the moment they want to axe you, like all that goes away.
Exactly. That's the huge difference. And we're all like, even though we say like we're talking pie in the sky and stuff like this, go look at a project called Quantum. And if you own the quantum key right now, on full disclosure, I own a quantum key. But one of the reasons why I bought it is because I was super excited. They're the first location that they're building this art studio and sort of just like hangout space in LA. If you hold the quantum key, you can go hang out in this place. You're not an employee. You're just like a member, and like you own that slot, and you can sell that key to anyone at any point. And so yeah, there's this ownership layer. So I think that owning a Bored Ape, if you go successful, owning a Bored Ape or owning a certain amount of, I think it's probably going to be the NFT. It won't be a certain amount of ApeCoin, but I could see a world where if you own a Bored Ape, you literally can stay for free in like live in the Bored Ape like ecosystem of like housing, real world housing.
So interesting.
Incredible.
So last question from me, Jay, maybe you have another question after this, but just to wrap up, I'm curious, since we're still zoomed out here, walk us through where you think Jump is going to go in 5-10 years. Like maybe you don't have a plan yet and you're like, let's see what the community does. But I'm sure at night when you're trying to sleep, you're thinking, okay, we could do this and whatever. Like what's on your mind for Jump in the next 5-10 years?
So we definitely have the aspect of like, what does the community want to do and what ideas do the community have? And then I also reserve, like, I'm a creative person and I'm a creator myself, and I get to create, right? So there's kind of two things at play here. Once we launch our NFT, there's essentially, right, that's the platform. Everybody that holds the token is the platform, right? So I will build benefits and resources and tools and all this stuff for those that hold the token. In reality, anyone can do that. It's permissionless, right? Like the hardest thing is gaining the trust of these token holders and being like, hey, I built something for you. Come over here and experience the thing that I built. Like, that's the hard part. So, when I think about 5 to 10 years down the line, I'm going to constantly be, in my own creative way, building for this group of token holders. I hope that the community will take my sort of example and say, you know what, it would be really beneficial to me. Like, I have a business idea, right? But rather than me like starting from scratch, why don't I piggyback off of the Jump community? Because like your business idea makes sense. And I'm like, cool. Like, I'm actually, because of the way tokens align incentives, I don't care, right? Normally the business would say, don't touch my, like, don't come create, like, touch my customer base or my community. It's mine. But actually, because of the token model, I don't care, because any additional benefits that someone else builds on top actually benefits the entire community, which makes them happy, which I like a happy community because I'm trying to build for a happy community. And then the more I can bring in people that want to do that, then I can go establish those partnerships and go, oh yeah, I think the Jump community would love this. So I'm going to help sort of introduce you to the Jump community, and you build on top of them. And that's great. And then that kind of gives that entrepreneur, that creator, they could come from inside the community. They could be someone outside of the community. But that gives them a starting point. And maybe some of my community members that are sort of in Jump will also then buy their token whenever that comes down the line. Oh, guess what? I'll probably buy the token too. Right? Like, you see how all of the incentives can like align everybody. So I'm like, you know what? Anybody out there, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to create my value, which basically is like what I'm good at. I'm good at analysis. I'm good at strategy, good at research. So I'm going to do all of those things, and I'm going to provide that for free to the community. But there's a lot of things that I'm not good at, and hopefully others will come in and add that value. And I'd be more than happy for them to do that, and then help them launch their own token, and I'll be the first one to buy it.
It's such an important part of the sort of the ethos of Web3 that I think doesn't get talked about enough, is composability and collaboration.
Yep.
And it's, I think we get caught up in the speculation and the the massive opportunity to make money right now, and a lot of people are so focused on that. But at the same time, we're building an entire new way to work, entire new way to collaborate, which enables us to do things from really like a value-based standpoint, where you can come together with people who want the same thing as you, and you don't have to worry so much. I mean, Kyle and I talk about this all the time. Maybe at some point you don't have to worry about the legal side as much, right? Because, oh wow, it's a token that we all have access to, and there's value for you and there's value for me, and forget the lawyers. You get some tokens, I get some tokens, we all win, right? So I think there's, and that sort of gets into why we're moving so fast in the space, right? I mean, the pace and time, it's a total time warp of, I mean, the way you even talked about it from, 2 years, and here we are.
It's moving fast because it unlocks that value, and it gives us an element, and really like human, like from a human nature, like we understand this. Like when you own a house, you like typically treat your neighbor like pretty good, right? Because you own property next to each other, right? And then there's this like network effect of like coordination. We're all going to drive on the same, like we're all going to obey the same like road laws. We're all going to like behave a certain way, even though like it doesn't benefit you in that, like, well, it does benefit you in that moment. But the reason that innate human coordination and collaboration and composability in our physical world, the reason it happens is because we have ownership of things. And when you go look at countries or nations where there's no ownership, what do you get? Mass chaos. And so from a digital perspective, we've never had ownership. And so what do we get? We get just like Twitter rage, we get Facebook rage, and all this other stuff because nobody owns stuff. So like, I want to own my neighbor's token, or at least provide value to their token as they provide value to my token, right? And it creates this like shared incentive that we're not actually like, it's not like we've never experienced that. We experience that in our everyday lives for the most part, if you live in a nation where ownership exists.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap up here because we've gone way over time, but man, this has been fun. Jeff, I hope we can do a part 2, maybe after the future launch of the NFT or whatever happens with Jump. But before we wrap up, I want to give you a quick opportunity to give your shill. Where can people find you online? How can people join Jump? We'll put some links in the show notes, but please take the floor.
Absolutely. So on Twitter, I'm at Jeff Kauffman Jr. And then for Jump, it's joinjump.community. So if you want to join the community, just head there, fill out the application. I send out, I get like 500 to 700 a week. So like I go through every single one of them one by one, literally look at every single individual LinkedIn profile. So it takes me about a week to go through everything. So once a week, I welcome new people in. So give me a little bit of time there. If you're listening to this in a few months, that process will change with kind of the restructuring of the NFT. But yeah, that's it. This has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jeff,
Thank you, Jeff.
Amazing conversation. Thank you so much. And can't wait to get you back on. We'll probably go for 2 hours on the next one though.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, all the best with Jump, and excited to see where things go with Jump and just in general with Web3. So thanks for joining and all the best, man.
All right. Thank you. Signing off.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you have yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.